even know where to look now. I'm so confused. Okay, I hope everyone can see me and hear me. You're all up there, I'm down here. I'm going to focus on this screen so it's not too confusing. So yes, design panel for Thursday the 25th of June. Let's call the meeting to order. Number one item, or number two, is adoption of agenda. I'm assuming everybody's seen the agenda. We don't have any late additions or anything to the agenda, so I suppose we have to vote on this. Do I have a motion for adoption of the agenda? Thank you, Steve.
I'll make that.
Oh, seconded by Kevin. All in favor? Okay, and then according to tradition, we will adopt the minutes after the presentations, and I believe we have two applications this evening. The first one is DP 001187 for 550 Brecken Road. So I'll let staff introduce it.
Thank you. The first application tonight, as mentioned, is DP 1187 on Brecken Road. This application is for a 4-story multifamily rental residential building with 87 dwelling units and under the building parking. The zoning on the site is R8 medium density residential. And the relevant design guidelines here are the general DP guidelines, the Newcastle Brecken neighborhood plan guidelines, and the steep slope development permit area guidelines.
And no variances?
No, there are two requested variances that we have identified at this time. One is for a building height variance of 0.75 meters, and one is for a retaining wall height variance of 1 meter. So with that being said, I will let the applicant move forward with their application. So whoever will be presenting can use the share screen function to begin the presentation.
So good evening, members of the Design Advisory Panel. My name is Sarah Alexander, and I'm the Director of Development for West Urban Development. With me today is our architect, Hannah Schulte, our landscape architect, and Laura Lynn Spithall. So slide 2. So today we'll provide an overview of the development company, why we chose this site, the guiding documents, how our design conforms to the development permit guidelines. Then we'll go through details of the architectural and landscape plans and summarize the overall project benefits. At this point, the team will be prepared to answer any questions you may have. Slide 3. West Urban is a local company with our head office in Campbell River, and we have developments across BC. We not only plan and build our properties, but we also manage them. So it's important for us to be a part of the community because we will be your neighbors. Our buildings vary in size and shape, but all include contemporary design aesthetics and quality finishes. We also provide unique and necessary elements such as gym, views, extensive landscaping, dog washing stations, great locations with amenities, and underground parkades. We specialize in purpose-built rentals on complex development sites, such as this one. 555 Brecken Road will be the 4th development we are pursuing in Nanaimo. The Arbutus, at the top left on your screen, is located at 5065 Upland Drive and has been constructed and is fully occupied. Our 4745 Ledgerwood Road development at the top right will have 2 buildings and 120 rental units, and it's nearly ready for construction. The bottom left is a rendering of our 1300 Junction Avenue property that we'll be discussing next on the agenda. And then at the bottom right is a rendering of 550 Brecken Road. Slide 4. The 0.52 hectare site is zoned R8 that allows for medium density residential with a floor area ratio of 1.4 with underground parking. The site has water views and is close to downtown, parks, shopping, and other amenities. It also has access to schools, employment opportunities, and major transit routes. All of these elements were considered as part of selecting this development property. Slide 5. To ensure we support the long-term vision of the community and address the unique features of the site, the proposed design aligns to both the OCP and general design guidelines for Nanaimo. The site has a future land use plan, as shown in map 1, as residential. The site is steeply sloped, therefore, based on map 3, is within the development permit area number 5 for steep slopes. It is also part of the development permit area 9 for multifamily residential. In alignment with both these guiding documents, we have designed a 4-story, 87-unit building that provides a mix of unit types. Kenneth will now provide more details on the development as described on slide 6.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenneth. I'm the architect for the project. So on slide 6, to ensure the development not only fits within the community but addresses the relevant DP guidelines, we employed moves such as using high-quality materials, responding to the natural slope of the site, placing the building at appropriate geodetic elevations to respond to streetscapes, neighbors, and the site. We utilized underground parking, created dynamic entryways positioned at high-profile locations, and designed an intensive landscape plan to address screening, adjacencies, and slope stability. So some of the considerations in arriving at our design was through a thorough evaluation of the site, including stormwater management and servicing, looking at the 2 street frontages, Brecon and Beach, and the prominent location of the site adjacent to the ferry terminal, which is an arrival point in Nanaimo. We looked at the slope stability and access as well as community amenity space. We tried to employ an efficient building design while meeting the owner's programmatic requirements. So the site plan shows the footprint of the building with access to the parkade at the furthest point away from that intersection. It also provides a greater setback from the adjacent neighbor. The main entry to the building is located at the intersection of the 2 roads at the V of the site and provides a natural prominent focal point as you're coming down Brecon. The rear of the site facing the ferry egress road is tiered to address the steep slope and provide an amenity area. At the lower corner of the site towards the Stewart Road intersection, the site slopes away, and that naturally daylights the underground parkade. So here's some floor plans of the underground parkade, superimposed one over the other. So we have the floor plans. We have an 87-unit building over 4 stories. It has a mix of unit types. You can see the large entryway at the B of the building, and then double elevators to service the amount of occupants that will be in this building. Slide 11, the elevations. As you can see, we're introducing a butterfly roof to this project. It's dramatic. As it slopes to meet the V, it comes down at that point, which addresses that corner edge and the V of the main entry. The overhangs are large, and the soffit underneath will be a wood look material. So we have a mix of the dark and the wood look material for the body of the building, and we're doing this to create a refined look. So we're subduing it with a simple palette so that the architecture is a bit more striking. We've introduced some steel columns at the main entry and at the large overhang towards the Stewart Avenue intersection where that exposed parkade will be. And then the lower part of the parkade will be clad in a perforated corten screen. So that will be it'll green up a little bit with the plantings that we have, but it will also glow at night, and that will create some interesting, some visual interest on that prominent corner. So the rear elevations are a bit hard to draw 2D in angled form, but it gives you an idea of the tiered yard. And we're doing this in response to the slope guidelines, but we're also looking to screen that parkade because we're trying to find that middle ground between the 2 road frontages and addressing that backyard area. We also have a little amenity space out the back, so we wanted to bring that grade up a little bit so people can come out at the main floor. So you can see the material palette is fairly simple, but the juxtaposition of the darker hardy and the wood hardy can be quite striking. So the wood we're going to put in areas where there'll be residents, so on the deck, the underside of the soffit, and I think it'll give a bit of a glow when people have lights on and that sort of thing. We've also broken up the facade with some window boxes, also lined with that wood look material. So the schematic sections just gives you an idea of how we're trying to address that slope. So the one across on Beach and then the one on Brecken. So just showing how we're burning it up. And then here's a rendering. This is from across the street on Brecken, and it shows the main entry as you're coming down, and how it's feed at that intersection. And then that sleek butterfly roof line as it sort of goes down Beach and then down Brecken. Sorry. And then this is the rear view of the rendering, so down from the ferry terminal. It shows the repayment, which in the computer rendering it's a bit hard to, we're trying to find a middle ground between when we first are doing the landscaping and what it will look like when it starts to mature up a little bit. But that gives you an idea of how we're trying to green up that so that it still it will look like a vegetated site still. And then this is the view coming up Brecken from the intersection. So it shows that one level of exposed parkade with the backlit screen. And then it also shows that warm wood look material and its contrast with the darker color. So it does brighten it up quite a bit. And then a night view of the building. And then I'll just pass it over to our landscape architect to talk about the landscape design.
Hi, so my name is Laura Lynn Sistall. We're on slide 18 now. So I think the site Kenneth has already described is quite steep, and there's some large walls that were introduced across the back, which is the east side of the site, to pick up some of that grade. And so those back retaining walls we were really careful with our planting back there. We tried to keep it almost entirely native plants, and the shrubs and trees are put fairly dense. They lots of evergreens, lots of colorful plants that will get quite big, some of them up to 2 meters, especially in a climate like you have on the island. So they'll really green up that wall and hide a lot of it from view. We worked with the stormwater management civil guys to create a catchment area below, but again, the planting's going to be quite dense, so you're not really going to see much of that. Even in the winter, the evergreens are going to be quite dense there. So it creates a really nice green wall when viewed from below down at the road or in your balconies or the small patio that we've provided for residents to take in views and look down into the lush kind of cascading drop-off. On the street side, so this is your west side as you come along Beach and Brecken, I've got a tall, narrow columnar tree effect that runs the whole length of the building. And then we've planted it below the evergreens, below the trees, we planted an evergreen base, and then some flowering deciduous shrubs in front of that. So you'll get lots of color, but you'll also have an evergreen base to that bottom level all year round. I think it's going to be quite quite lush and dramatic, given the amount of plant material, and I think it'll create a really nice base to this building.
So thank you, Laura Lynn. The development at 550 Brecken Road will provide much-needed new and diversified housing in Nanaimo. Approval of this site will enable the development of underutilized land while using existing infrastructure. It is located near employment, schools, community amenities, and will therefore be a prime rental location. Proceeding with this development will also contribute $87,000 as part of the community amenity contribution and an ongoing property tax uplift. Thank you for your opportunity and consideration of development permit application, and we welcome your comments. And my colleagues and I are here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Before I open it up to panel members' questions and comments, I just want to check, do any panel members have any questions of staff? Okay, scan through my video here. Seeing none, I think.
So we can just ask them to stop sharing the screen.
Oh, right. And could the applicant please stop sharing your presentation? There we go. Okay, so I will open it up to panel members for questions and comments. Again, I do this kind of randomly. Depends who's in front of me first. So, Tony, you are my first video face, so over to you.
Thank you. Just a couple little things. First of all, I really like this project. It's just a really nice, bold design without being overwhelming. Two things. One is, could you explain, I don't know if I missed it in your presentation, which was very, very good, sort of, thank you. Could you explain that front entry feature with the sloping glass, it looks like? You just remind me of what that was about if I missed it, or explain it if I didn't.
Yeah, so we're trying to create some visual interest on that corner as you're coming down to the ferry. Something a little bit more dramatic than just, an entry canopy at the main level. And so we are still in the process of working with the window manufacturer and West Urban to figure out the best way forward, if that's going to be curtain wall or if we're going to try to do it with a raked window, like a section panel. So it doesn't, it's angled like it would be angled like a raked window, but it doesn't come out, like it doesn't slope outward towards the door or towards the street, sorry. If that makes sense.
Well, sort of. I mean, without seeing any detail, it looks like sloping glass, kind of a tall, narrow pyramid kind of thing, which from a code point of view and structural and other thing, I can hardly wait to see how it turns out. Anyway, as I said, I wasn't sure if I missed it or not, but I guess it's a glazed entry feature, so that's great. The only other comment that I had is that those wood brackets on the ends of the buildings, which I quite like, except that my personal opinion is that they look a bit tentative. They look very thin and almost spindly, and I wondered if it was just a rendering, or first of all, if you need them in the first place, but secondly, if you are going to put them in, perhaps they need a little more heft to be in a little better scale with their height. They really look very flimsy, but that's the only problem I've got. That's a pretty good project. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Kate?
Okay, first, thank you, all of you, for your thorough presentation. I appreciate it. I'm the landscape architect on the design panel for the city, today I want to speak a little bit about the form of your building and how it fits or doesn't fit into the design guidelines that the city has for this lot. So I had noted I'm very familiar with this neighborhood also. I live up the road. So I just want to first start with a few of the comments that you had in your the architect's written response regarding the forming character. That the building, that it had varied building massing, and that created the typology of this design. And from my perspective, this isn't a varied building in form. It's two rectangles coming together. And so I'm interested to hear your response to that. Also, that you have identified that, yes, this is a very significant focal point, arrival point for Nanaimo, and the building the form and character of it doesn't appear to relate to the existing slope as it should, as set out in the steep slope guidelines. The building cuts off all key potential views coming down Brecon Hill to the greater Newcastle Island and Departure Bay and shoreline. I also noted that you described your building as being a transitional building between the single-family residential neighborhood that exists adjacent to yours and the ferry terminal and existing uses maybe on Stewart Avenue. And I wouldn't consider this scaled building and the way it's been articulated as a transitional building. I don't see any change in form or shape or character, and I don't see it also reflecting the neighborhood's character. Nanaimo doesn't have a lot of mid-century modern homes, but this particular neighborhood does, and it would be great to see that more articulated in your design and pay homage to that more specifically than you are. And then speaking to I'm sorry, it's going to be a bit long, but because I think this piece of property is really important for Nanaimo. What gets built here is really important. And I recognize it's a difficult site, and I would question it. Unfortunately, it's zoned R8, and I question that. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I also would like to see greater amenity space. From what I can gather, you just have a small patio, and it's being shown as having a few tables, so I don't think that's adequate for a rental property of 80 units. I don't see any space to gather and to engage with the landscape. And then finally, I would encourage the landscape architect I think it's very important to include our indigenous plant palette, and then to further explore that to reflect the island. Here we're in the rain shadow, so some of the plants you've chosen may be better suited for a little wetter condition, but I appreciate that you might be creating that down in the lower areas. So just to be conscientious of that as well, that we're a little bit different from the mainland and or wetter regions of our province. I'm just going to stop there right now. I just agree with most of the staff comments that I think you haven't made a great enough attempt to fit this in to the guidelines.
Okay. Did you want to respond to any of those comments / questions, or?
Sure, I'll try to cover off. You might have to re-ask again for me. But so part of the design, we're trying to address Brecon, which slopes down quite a bit, and Beach. getting a ramp down into the parkade, that's to the exterior. So you can imagine on a steep slope, that becomes a challenge. In the winter, it can't be very steep. You still have to tie into the road elevation. We have a right-of-way at the back of the property that we had to work with our civil engineer to meet the servicing of the building. So there was an elevation that we had to work with that at the back of the property. So we didn't want to drop, we couldn't, first of all, drop the building much lower than where it is right now. And the city had requested that there was more engagement from the main floor patios with the street. It is a large building, it's a 4-story building. The site is heavily treed as is. And as you come down Brecken, you actually don't have a view of the water. Like if the rendering that shows the corner of the building, the trees that are on that site right now are interfering with that view. So as you move down Brecken Road and the building elongates down the site, yes, where it opens up to that park corner, that the building will block the view down to that area. And that's why we're trying to provide the architectural detailing with the dramatic corner, the columns on the edge and the core 10 to, respond to that a bit more. I think I understand the neighborhood is I think this building is a good transition through from up the street. There's the commercial node where the Tim Hortons is and the Safeway or Save On Foods. Then the new building just at the top corner of Brecken. I believe that's a 4-story building happening there. And then as you come down into the more industrial style of the ferry terminal and then the market, I do think there's a good transition happening there. And then the very form, we like to keep our building envelope efficient, so we don't do a lot of stepping back, which is one of the discussions we had with planning. So in light of that requirement, we try to create or make other architectural moves. So with projecting decks, window boxes, the roof lines, adding the columns, that's how we vary the form. So maybe not literally with the building footprint. So, and then maybe Laura Lynn, you can speak to the planting.
Yeah, may I comment first about related to architecture or ask questions? So the problem is that the buildings you've referenced, in between those buildings and yours is zone single family, and I don't see it primarily changing. And I just wonder why your building, maybe it should be 2 buildings, not one big building. Maybe it should be 2-3 stories, step back to the 4-story, so that you have that instead of, so you're on Beach Avenue, for example, you only have a few meters between your flank wall and the neighboring single-family home. So if your edges were stepped back, that feels more like a transition and integration, and it's what is more articulated in the guidelines. That's all.
Yeah, so one of the moves that we did was put the access off of that corner, so the ramp down into the parkade adjacent to the neighbor, that's over a 10-meter setback. So we were cognizant of that. We also left a strip of planting that could happen so that privacy buffer is still existing. And then again, with the stepping back, it's just, from my standpoint as an architect, it's not, I understand it's a DP requirement, but it doesn't make the building envelope as efficient in my opinion. So it's not something that our firm likes to do.
Okay.
speaking on landscape, so you mentioned about the open space places to gather. We did look at some other options where we came out with the patio and then stepped down to another lower patio that took in like a part of the second tier. We pulled it up because to do that would make the lower wall even higher, or a pile of stairs that didn't make it as accessible and inclusive. But I think we can certainly expand that area a little bit and maybe even create sort of little pockets on that upper landing so that you can have, say, 2 or 3 groups out there that don't feel like they're sitting all together. We'll definitely explore that. Because this was the north side of the building, I tried to use almost exclusively native or very native-like planting on that side. And I tried to put in things like ocean spray and Oregon grape and lots of the drought-tolerant plants that you see in xeriscapes and stuff. And ostrich fern, but the whole site's irrigated, and that is the north side. So I think not too worried about them not surviving, but I can appreciate what you are saying, that it can get baked over in this.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then I just noticed you had Mahonia repins, that it doesn't grow here on the island, but Mahonia nervosa does. But however, it is hard to come by, so
yeah,
you gotta do whatever you do.
I think I have a couple different, I think I've got the tall Oregon, the creeping Oregon. Another island project, we found it really hard to get the low Oregon grape.
It is. It does well, but it's hard to get. Also, though, then, sorry, when the architect was speaking, it reminded me of that you've chosen to use the tall Oregon grape as your screening between the edge of the parkade entrance and the adjacent property, and I don't feel like that would be an adequate screening, but
it gets quite big, it's evergreen, it's dense, and it's spiny, so it's a sort of bit of a barrier shrub, and there was a lot of Oregon grape on this site when they went through it, so kind of to create a barrier that nobody's going to want to go into, and then it gets those yellow flowers, and it's there all year.
Yeah, well, maybe you can think a little bit more about it as a visual barrier than an actual physical barrier, or
as well. But I just wanted it to sort of be both visual, evergreen, big, and so just to kind of give a good, solid 4-season side to that neighbor.
Yeah, and so thinking of also the creating you can create amenity space by adding benches near the front entry, and those kind of small details will help you make this more useful development. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Let's see who else I've got. Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I like the project. I like how the building's cited, which is probably pretty obvious, but especially how the building relates to the street. I like the form and character of the building. It's simple form, clean lines, the use of colors, the darker colors in the wood, I think will work very well together. I would like to say, just right off the bat, echo Kate's comment about trying to increase amenity space. I think anything you can do to increase that would really help. Tony's comment about those angled columns or braces, I agree with that comment. Also, I'd like to ask why you didn't also run it in the other direction, like mirror it.
Sorry, I was muted. So have like a V for the columns, is that what you mean?
Well, you have one angled in the one direction, but why don't you have another one angling out the other direction toward the other end?
I just liked how it wasn't symmetrical. It was just a preference.
Okay, yeah, because there is a lot of symmetry in the building, but I just wanted to know why. But I agree with Tony that I think you would benefit, from making them thicker, especially if you're going to consider them to look like they're structural. Other than that, I support the variances. And I'd like to say I really like the use of the amount of evergreen and the variety of evergreen trees that are on site. I know a lot of trees are getting pulled up, and it's probably impossible to retain any of them. And I'm happy that you are doing that, replacing them with different species of evergreen. So that's all I have. I like the project, so thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Who's left? I've got Steve.
Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you very much for the project, ladies. Very well done. I do have some concerns in regards to this. The form and character in the building, it's gorgeous. I just don't know if this is our introduction to Nanaimo and it's down in your face coming off the ferry, and you're looking right into a big rental unit. I appreciate with the landscaping and getting as many trees to soften it, but you are looking at one big ass building, excuse my English. And for that, I believe that sometimes less is more. And with R8 zoning and with FAR going to 1.37 or something along those lines, just under what's allowed, it really seems too much, in my opinion. And, it's not often that I actually say this, so I'm very concerned with that. The second thing is access points, Beach Road and Brecken Road. I'm surprised actually this has just come up, but the access points for parking spots out front for 87, is it 87 units, 78 units? Regardless, for a lot of units, and you have 4 places to drop off. It seems like too much to me for the density, even though it shows there. And I guess the last thing with access points, going down Brecken, where that turnoff is, there's only going to be one turnoff, if I'm not mistaken, going up Brecken and onto Beach. Is that correct?
Maybe, Caleb, do you recall we worked with Sybil to work on the road design?
Sorry, Steve, could you just actually clarify that question for me?
Is it just a write-in?
Oh, I think we're still working on that. That is partially in the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Transportation. Brecken Road is a provincial highway at this location, so we are looking at that and confirming what the access would be for that spot. Oh, Steve, you're muted.
As I swore off camera though.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, you're going to have a lot of feedback from MOE in regards to this. Being that it's going in one direction, they will not, or I'd be very, very surprised that there would be any access coming down the hill. And that's going to be a thorn in your side. And the only reason why I say that is from personal experience. on dealing with Modi on Stewart Avenue. The point that I really have is the concern over the density, even though it does fall into place. And that building, as gorgeous as it is, and it is, without a doubt, that's our gateway into Nanaimo. And I don't know if that's, I'm not convinced that that's what I want to be seeing coming into Nanaimo.
Okay. Did you have any other comments or no?
No.
Okay, thank you. Tyler.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for the presentation. I had one question and a comment. In the presentation, you referenced sort of the design guidelines, but I did not see the Newcastle neighborhood or Newcastle Brecken neighborhood plan reference. And I'm just curious, was that looked at when designing this building?
We did look at it. It's missing from our slide page. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So, I actually really like the building, personally. And I like the way it looks and everything like that. However, when I look at the design guidelines, I do not think it addresses a lot of the guidelines. I think some of it has been articulated, but just to reiterate, no step downs along the slope. It's a really large building mass, and I didn't see the effort to really break it up. And sort of the comment earlier to, I think it was Kate, in response to Kate, sort of there was an acknowledgement there was a DP requirement, but then it also said, but that's not something our firm really likes to do. And so I'm sort of taking the approach here, well, and I've made this comment with respect to corporate guidelines before, you know, these are community-created documents and community-approved documents, and so I think the community's preference needs to have the higher weighting with that respect. So I don't really see the neighborhood blending, and those are all the things the design guidelines sort of speak to. So as much as I really personally like this project, I don't think it has made a big enough attempt to address the community guidelines.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to do a quick scan. I think I've got everybody but me. So well, as chair, I sort of do what I'm doing right now, but I also, I did want to chime in on a couple of things because I think I have the same sentiments and comments as a number of the panel members. It's a challenging one because I think the form and character of the building is striking. It is impressive. Quality materials. I think it's well designed. It's a classic case, I think, of this building on a slightly different site, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I know your challenges are many. You have a sloping site. I think you've dealt with it as best you can, knowing that you want to maintain access to the street. You have these design guidelines that unfortunately, you know, it's a challenge integrating 4-story multifamily buildings into single-family neighborhoods. Doesn't matter where you are. So yeah, it's tough, and it's tough, I think, for all of us to review it and come up with some salient comments and suggestions. I did actually, following off of Steve's comment about the access in and out. And I would have asked this of staff if I had thought of it first. So I have a question for staff. Do you know, was there a traffic study or traffic report done for this one that addressed the potential issues around access?
No, I don't believe we have a traffic impact assessment, and the need has not been identified yet. We would typically ask for that at the rezoning stage. If we were rezoning, we would want that supporting document. Mm-hmm. But for this one, we have not seen it yet. But again, we will be awaiting Moti's comments as well.
Right. Okay. And then I don't want to go over everything that's been discussed or talked about already, but I did have a couple of questions. Some of them are quite simple, I think. in your elevations and kind of in the rendering, I think more in the rendering, you're showing, I think it's a stone facing or something for your retaining walls. Can you just confirm what your plan is for the retaining walls and the base of the building where it's exposed?
So we're back and forth with what that material is. We talked about doing either just concrete, like often placed walls, or looking at a gabion style of repayment, which will green up much nicer. Laura Lynn, I don't believe we have landed on a system yet.
No, I think if they're going to be block walls, they would certainly be a textured-based block, or like you said, the gabion basket, the rock-filled wire baskets. I think they were still going back and forth with geotech on what is the most suitable for that. The vegetation is going to cover a lot of the bottom all times of the year, so it's really just how the top sort of portion of the wall is going to be presented that I think is super important, because you're going to see that, and they are fairly prominent walls from views from all below. So yeah, I mean, we can get back to you on the exact material.
And you do have some areas of the foundation parquet that are exposed, not huge, but so are you thinking that those are exposed concrete?
So the part that faces the Stewart Ave will be clad in a 410 panel. And then on the other, where the ramp is coming down to the parquet, that will just be exposed concrete. And then anywhere else throughout the site, we're planting it up to try to cover, to screen that wall.
Okay, so there's a difference between the architectural exposed foundation and the retaining walls.
Yeah.
Okay, and your Cortan treatment on the ramp I quite like, because I think when the cars are zipping around, the headlights will do what you said they're going to do. Am I correct in saying that the top of that is covered and planted?
So this is something we're going back and forth with the client on. So we're talking about it being an extra amenity area or planted up. I mean, it's got a huge roof overhang, which, I mean, it can get pretty windy over there on that exposed corner, but that might be a great place to have an amenity space with a bit of, we would do like the raised planting beds, because that would be for waterproofing and all that sort of thing on top of the parquet, but we haven't landed on an exact direction from the client yet.
Okay, because that was actually going to be my comment, was that whether you plan it or not, people are going to find their way to that space because it's going to be the best viewing platform looking out over the harbor and the ferries terminal. And tied to that is there's actually a comment in the staff comments about the potential to connect the statutory right-of-way walkway to Brecken. And I was just wondering, did you consider that at all, or is that a non-starter?
That's the one that's below. Is that the pathway that's below on the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did talk when we met with planning, we talked about that. So it was the connection, Caleb, maybe you can refresh my memory there was the lot next door, we couldn't connect through there, so it would be the sidewalk all the way around to the intersection and then down.
And I do not recall the details, and of course that trail does run through the BC Ferries property. There is a right-of-way for public access, but how that would connect with the site, with the grade and everything, yes, I don't know the details if it is feasible or not, but it's something that we were interested in seeing if possible, if it could be achieved. where would it go? And I think you had previously indicated in that southeast corner there could be some potential.
Okay,
So it's floating out there, so.
my initial reaction to that or take on that was, I think, potentially, I know these things are always tricky because you're bringing walkways onto private property, but you have a really unique and kind of interesting opportunity to wrap a stair around your Core 10 parquet wall that carries people down to that path and also engages them into that perforated Core 10 feature. Could be pretty cool, but
Yeah, that's a suggestion.
okay. So I think what I'm going to do, I've heard a number of comments from a number of panel members. So I think what I need to do is kind of poll the panel members about at least 3, if not 4 of us expressed some concerns about the scale, form, character, massing, etc. of the project. I think everybody also said how much they like the project. So it's a bit of a balancing act, I think. So I guess my initial question is, I didn't hear a lot of strong recommendations. It was more general concerns or questions about the overall fit with the neighborhood and the guideline documents. So I think what I would ask at this point is there someone, do we have a motion that we can put on the table for discussion?
Well, I would say, well, this might be one of the few times where we might have a vote where we're not going to be unanimous, and it's really going to be a matter of if somebody was to put a motion forward to accept the application, it's a matter of whether or not that gets voted down and another motion is brought up. So I would start out, even though this might get rejected, is I thought at least the comments I had or heard were looking at increasing amenity space and also looking at the thickness of the brace columns, looking to thicken them. And I think there was comments by Kate about indigenous species for planting. Did you have any other ones there, Charles?
Yeah, no, that was part of the columns I had, yes. There were some, I mean, again, they were more wrapped in general comments about form and character, about it being, not being a varied massing, not stepping. It's like I said, the challenge is that they're actually designing to the zoning. They're not trying to go beyond it. But we are looking at this large unified mass of a building. Right. So I think probably where it looks like there's sort of a left and a right on that. Either people are going to want the form and character changed to meet the neighborhood guidelines, or to accept it with some minor recommendations. So I might as well get things going, because I think this will probably get rejected. But I would say that the application be accepted as presented, with support for the variances, and with the recommendation that the applicant look to increase amenity space, look to thicken the columns on the braces, and also to consider the use of more local indigenous species for the landscape concept. And if there's a seconder. Okay, do we have a seconder? Tony?
Yes.
Okay, seconded by Tony. Do we have any discussion, comments, additions, subtractions, friendly amendments?
And I would just say that we don't have to vote for this. That we usually are always unanimous, but if you still feel strongly against it and somebody wants to bring up a different motion, that's what we're here for.
Hi, can I chime in here?
Yep.
And then Kate, you could follow up if that's okay. I'm not I can't support this. It's just, I don't believe that this is, I think we should redesign the building itself, either and follow the design guidelines of the Brecon Hill Association, and consider that as a maybe 2 buildings, but something a little less substantial. So I wouldn't support it for that reason.
Okay. Kate?
Yes, I'm the same as Steve, and I did want to, I always come out with just, I want to get to the point and tell the people presenting what I think, but I do recognize it is very high quality design, and like everyone else, I just don't think it is the right fit for this corner, and I think you can do something really cool here that really fits the design guidelines, that really fits with this neighborhood, in that single family neighborhood that is right next to the project, that's not changing anytime soon. And potentially we're going to see this ferry terminal leave as well, and that's going to change the whole landscape down here at the waterfront. So I don't support it. I would love to see them come back with something that really fits within the design guidelines and elements we pointed out. And I think it's a challenge for the architect to make it efficient as it fits the guidelines.
Okay. Anybody else, Tyler, or anybody else want to comment, or Tony? Yeah.
I'll just quick. Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, Tyler.
Sure. Yeah, I can't support it too. As much as I really personally like the design, it's just I think it needs to come back to the panel. And just commenting on Kate there, I don't know if you're privy to information, but I have never heard that ferry terminal is going anywhere anytime soon. So.
Tony?
It's the word on the street.
Okay, Tony?
Others have expressed, so I won't reiterate them. What I would point out, though, is that a lot of times when we run into this, certainly I do as an architect, you run into guidelines that say categorically, after the 3rd or 4th story, you must step back, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a little ham-fisted. I think that when you try to do those kinds of things and pretend that it's transitional between a single-family house and a 4-story apartment building, I think you're fooling yourself. I think what you're going to get with a building that maybe is more heavily articulated, maybe has a little more horizontal expression to it, maybe has a step back up with floor, I don't know. I do know the challenges of that for the feasibility of the project, because I've done a lot of it. But I think that all you're going to get is a more dramatic looking 4-story building. And personally, given the choice, I see so very few bold, simple, clean, contemporary statements like this building shows, which is why we all like it. My concern is that if we go overboard, or the architect, the applicant, to do all kinds of massaging machinations to make it fit with, whatever these guidelines say in more detail. I'm not that familiar with them, sorry. I'm not sure we're going to get a better result, and it's definitely not going to be transitional. So it's going to look different. Okay, my 2 cents here.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to add a counterpoint. I wouldn't even have a problem if it was the same building, but the architect actually revealed a really great point. Yes, when the trees, like there's a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees on site, so yeah, you don't quite see the view. But when you put the building there and you remove the trees, you remind us of the view that's there. And I would love to see through that corner and see out to the water, and you could do that with your building design. And so maybe it's just a matter of managing that corner so you start to feel like you have two buildings instead of one big block. And I think what's hard with this site as well is there are no spaces for any other buildings to relate to it. Like there is no other building coming down the road that's going to be, you know, with this sort of, anyway, that's all I want to say.
Okay. So, I think probably the best way forward at this point is we should vote on the motion that's before us, and then potentially consider a different motion after that. So can we do that? We can do that. Yeah. As opposed to trying to amend this motion to something different. So, unless anybody else has any other comments they want to add, I will call the question. Those in favor of, do you want me to read the motion again? Or does everybody? Okay. So those in favor of the motion as tabled or as presented? I see one thumbs up. I think I've got Kevin. Yeah. Oh, and Tony, yeah. So mover and seconder are clearly in favor. And those opposed? I have no idea how to do this. Okay, so the motion, I think, it's hard to tell on this. I should look up there, right?
Steve, yourself, Kate.
Right, so I think that was four against 2, right? Okay, so I think, and we have had, I'm trying to recall, we've had applications in the past that we've asked to come back, and I can't recall if that is a motion that we make. I just want to get the language right. So it's a motion to request them to come. We're not. Are we denying or recommending not approval and a return to the panel?
I think it's just typically we would see a recommendation to return with and then you would provide recommendations.
Some guidance.
So it's not accepted as presented at that point, is
So yeah, not accepted as presented.
I can stand on this if you want.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Since I know it's coming back, or we know it's going to come back, I would like to make a motion that the application return and address the recommendations that are written down, and also come back with a project that addresses the form and character and how it relates to the rec and neighborhood guidelines.
Okay.
Does that make
I'll second that.
I'll second that. I guess I can't, sorry.
Tyler's getting a second.
Tyler, okay, thank you, Tyler. And I think, comments?
Yeah, that's quick comment, and you know, I agree some of these design guidelines can be impossible to meet. It's just in order, you know, the perspective I have is that, you know, have to have a certain level of confidence that they have been attempted to be met, and that confidence, I just didn't have that confidence with the application as presented. So I don't think there's any expectation that every single guideline will be met. It's just the level of effort to achieve it, and where it may fall short, there's a good rationale.
Right. Kate, did you have a comment?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that is good. Yeah.
Okay, I thought I saw your hand up.
No, I
Yeah, and I would just like to add, similar to what Tyler said, I think it's important that we're not trying to be prescriptive about following guidelines. I think generally, and you've heard our comments, but generally I think there are some relatively simple moves that could be made. I was going to make the same suggestion that Kate made about taking that triangular glazed opening at the main entrance and actually making it a peekaboo window through the building, because that then would help break it up and give you that glimpse of the view. I think there's other moves that or ideas that are in the staff report that could be simple variations, slight variations in the roof line, in and out or something. But there are moves that can be made. It doesn't mean you have to step back the building all over the place. So I think we're trying to encourage the applicant to modify the design slightly, but everybody, I think, agrees that it's a stunning building. It just needs a few tweaks, and they're not in the recommendations, but it would be very helpful too if some of those things that we talked about that were in discussion or in progress be a little more resolved, like the potential amenity area over the parkade, any access to the walkway. I forget what the other one was, but the type of retaining wall, because you see a lot of retaining walls in the Nanaimo and some are better than others. So I think we have a mover and a seconder. Do we have any other comments or questions from the panel? I don't think so. Okay, so I'm going to call a question on the second motion. All those in favor? I think that's everyone. All right. Okay, thank you. And now we have this interesting situation where we have the same applicant.
Yes. Yes, the second application on tonight's agenda is Development Permit 1190 at 1300 Junction Avenue. This property is zoned Corridor 2, mixed-use corridor, and received a rezoning that was completed in 2019. The proposal is for 3 4-story multifamily rental residential buildings, each with 71 units for a combined total of 213 units. The relevant design guidelines for this area are the General Development Permit Area Guidelines and the Chase River Town Center Design Guide. And there have been no variances identified requested for this application. And yes, we will ask the same applicants to present again.
Okay, thank you, Caleb. So thank you once again for the opportunity to speak. Kenneth, do you have the floor yet? Okay, perfect. So once again, my name is Sarah Alexander, and I'm here with Hannah Schulte, who's the architect, and Laura Lynn-Spithall, who's the landscape architect. So slide 2. This presentation will be similar to the last one in that we'll provide an overview of why we chose this site, the guiding documents and conformity to the development permit guidelines. Then we'll go through details of the architectural and landscape plans and summarize the overall project benefits. And then, again, we'll be available to answer your questions. So you can skip the next slide because you've already heard about our company. So site context. The 1.71 hectare site is zoned Core 2, mixed-use corridor that allows for 71 units per building that are up to 14 meters in height with an FAR of 1.38 with underground parking. The site is close to local shops, parks, services, and other amenities, and it also has schools and employment opportunities and major transportation routes nearby. All of these elements were considered as part of selecting this development property. To ensure we support the long-term vision of the community and to address these unique features of the site, the proposed design aligns with both the OCP and general design guidelines, which includes that the site has future land use as shown in map 1 as residential, and it is also part of the development permit area 9 for multifamily. The development also aligns with the Chase River Town Center design guidelines. In alignment with these documents, we have designed 3 71-unit buildings that provide a mix of unit types, and Kenneth will now provide more details on the development as described in slide 6.
Okay. Can you guys hear me or am I muted?
Yep, we can hear you.
You're good. Okay, thanks. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned, we reviewed the DP guidelines, and in conversation with planning, we look to address one of the guidelines in the Chase River is the Finnish agrarian component. So that was a big ticket item, so it set the stage for the overall design. We utilized underground and surface parking to meet the parking requirements. We look to address all of the street frontages. So there's 3 on this project, well 4 actually, but we'll get there. And provide a variety in scale and form through this agrarian requirement with durable materials. So some of the considerations in arriving at the design was through a thorough evaluation of the site. It was a fairly large undertaking between myself, landscape, civil, and our environmental consultants. So Wexford Creek crosses through the top portion of the site. And we're looking at restoring that and determining the relevant setbacks and how we would place the building with those factors. So the other site factor is the completion of 11th Avenue and how the buildings were sited to address that, and then connecting to the large natural area that will be over by the Wexford Creek. So the site plan shows the footprints of the building. It has an internal parking layout, so we wanted to keep the parking within, not on the outskirts of the building. And you can see to the right of the site plan, the Wexford Creek, there's a setback there, and then there's a large area between the building and the setback where we would create a stormwater management system, and that also provides a large outdoor amenity area for residents. There's 2 access points into the development that we also worked with staff to locate, so one from 11th and the other one off of Junction. The site does slope east, so we'll have 2 parkades with ramps and then one is a straight shot in. And then pedestrian circulation is throughout the site, and then also from, we've fronted building B to the 11th Street. The building faces 11th Street, I guess is my point. So all 3 buildings are the same footprint. They have 71 units and they have a variety of unit types, including 3 bedrooms with the underground parking. So the elevations of the building, because they're the same footprints, they're similar, but that addresses construction efficiency, but we're looking to vary the material to break that up. We still want them to speak to each other, to the same development, so we thought that would be a way forward with this. We've provided articulation through the feature bump outs at the windows, and you can just see very form with the peak roofs, which they sort of relate to that very utilitarian barn style, and then the flat roof, and then behind we have the gable roof that, or the hip roof, sorry, that comes down and terminates over the deck. Sorry. So these are the other 2 building elevation fronts, and they just show the variation of color. And then same here, we've just shown a screenshot of each of those. So we're looking at using corrugated metal to respond to that agrarian component. The fiber cement siding will be the majority of the siding, but utilizing different materials, possibly looking at different exposures, and then breaking it up with the wood around the windows. There'll be some panel, the majority of it's black, and then we'll have some panel around the window sections with an easy trim detail. And so this is a rendering from 11th Avenue. You can see the articulation through the roof line and the variation of materials. And then we're still working through renderings for council, so I'm sorry for the the quality of these, but we just wanted to give you a sense of the aerial of the project, so showing the 3 buildings with the pond in behind, and then the parking sort of tucked within the 3 buildings. And then Laurelyn can talk about the landscape.
Sorry, I'm done. Okay, so again, I think Tana touched on a few items. So I'll just run over some of the other goals with respect to the landscape design intent. It's a little different from the last project, which was very dense in its planting design. Here we've proposed a mix of street tree types to frame the frontages along Junction and 11th, and then increase variety in form and color and avoid creating a monoculture with just one specific type of street tree. So we tried to keep some language that ties it together, but then bring in some other types of trees. The ones that are really drawn really small on 11th there, those are just very columnar shaped tree, but they still do get quite tall. And then they're mixed in with some larger trees, and they have different colors and leaves to give lots of variety. We went with a dense, sort of simple evergreen hedging plant around the perimeter of all the buildings. That gives some low maintenance but 4-season appeal. We didn't have a ton of space to work with between sidewalks and the building, so having something that with simple hedging was kind of important there. And that simple massing gives way as you come around the north side on 10th Street. Our planting buffer sort of widens and steps up along that north building. And so in there we've got a mix of shade-tolerant native trees, understory plants, and then a few chosen ornamental shrubs to give it a backdrop. But the majority of the understory are all native shade-tolerant species. And that'll give a solid green ground level base to that north side. It widens there, the street. We've got a bulge out as you come around that northwest corner. And so we purposefully kept that as simple, low, open grass with a couple carefully placed conifers to maintain good sight line, circulation, desire lines. We added an informal kind of shortcut path that'll cut through that bit of open lawn because nobody's really going to walk all the way around the corner if their destination is to continue down south. And then in the parking lot, we've got some planting islands, ornamental grasses, which when you don't have the opportunity for real big planting areas, I mean, it's a hard life for a plant in a parking lot. So these ornamental grasses, I tested these in Whitehorse, I tested them in Whistler, which Kate will know, we're in Whistler. And then on the islands, these are good, solid grasses for parking life. And then I think probably the most important part of this site from a landscape point of view is the restoration that's going to happen to daylight the Wexford Creek on the east side. And so the native planting, the plants along there are going to be protected and enhanced. And then a little bit of a buffer kind of to blend that edge of the native planting to the open grass area. We really wanted to give these buildings, and most likely there'll be kids living in these buildings and residents somewhere with a bit of open space and for recreational use, multi-use. The Chase River neighborhood plan talked a lot about a common vision for retaining a rural character. And they talked about farms and access to creeks, open spaces. And so Tanis had mentioned sort of picking up a barn sort of style in some of the architecture and without having just open wild grass fields. We wanted to give that open space, a little bit of a walking loop, something that keeps your nice big views into that area for safety, and security, but also gives somewhere for you to run and play. So I think that kind of covers what our objectives were here. Yeah, welcome your comments.
Okay.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, there you go.
This is the ongoing issue.
Begin this screen share again.
Did you have any final comments you wanted to make, or?
Yeah, just to wrap up.
Yep.
So, I mean, I similar to last time. So, thank you for your listening. The development at 1300 Junction Avenue will provide much needed new and diversified housing in Nanaimo. Approval of this site will enable the development of underutilized land while using the existing infrastructure. It's located near employment centers, schools, and community amenities, and therefore will be a prime rental location. And proceeding with the development will also contribute $213,000 as part of the community amenity contribution. So we're available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. I'll do what I always do. Any panel members have any questions for staff about the application? You can look up there. Seeing none. I'm also going to do what I usually do, and I'm going to kind of go in reverse order. So I'm going to start comments and questions with Tyler.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for the presentation again. My comments are almost like completely opposite of last time. I think it's a great project, and I really appreciate a lot of the efforts to capture that rural feel and sort of seeing it with some other projects in that area that have yet to be built. But I think really well done, and curious to see what other panel members says, but really highly supportive of this, and think it's a nice addition. The site has a ridiculous amount of frontage, but really good effort to try to pull the buildings up, and so yeah, in support.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Thanks, ladies, again. Really nice project. I concur with Tyler on this. It helps when you have a flat site, and it blends in with the existing buildings that are there, country grocer and the shopping area. It's a fabulous project, and fully supported on this from my point of view. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Kate?
Thank you again for your presentation, and you might hear a different tone from me. I think in this case, this building works well in the site, and it reflects the design guidelines, the character guidelines very well, and how lucky you are to have that stream on your property. And so I actually just had a question. Are you guys going to be doing, who's doing the plants? Like, are you going to be doing any restoration within that, or is it just retaining existing?
We're daylighting it, so I think right now.
Oh, okay.
It's going to culvert some sections of the creek, so.
Okay, so you're going to be replanting that whole area?
I don't know. Laura, do you recall what we?
Yeah, so I think that As far as I know, they're biologists. We're working with staff, I think, to determine that it was kind of out of our scope at this point. I tried to create a little bit of a buffer edge to the creek, but we weren't involved in any kind of rehabilitation, so I'm not sure.
Okay, all I was going to say is, and I think it's a staff comment as well, but I'm sure you'll be coordinating with those as you develop this, and maybe that your plant pellets sort of mesh a little, not completely, but a little. You know, that transitional. It's a transitional space, and I'm assuming they're going to. You may be looking at fencing there as well, which will. I don't know, city staff. They need.
Yes, through the chair, we will be reviewing the buffering there for the edge of the riparian area, which is measured from top of bank. The area that is currently protected by a statutory right-of-way that was secured at rezoning, in that area the city will be carrying out restoration work. We are doing that as part of a future DCC project. So we had already identified that, I think, even before the rezoning was coming forward. But that is going to be a city DCC project for restoration and planting in the stat right-of-way.
Okay, and then I just want to reiterate some of the staff comments. I really appreciate that you have the space for amenity space, so that's great, and that you know, the suggestion of it with the walking loop, and I think you can, I'm sure as you will develop the details of this, just to massage it a little bit more, and I'm sure I'll see places for sitting and other kind of uses as the design develops, and that I think that would be really great for the residents. And I think, and I saw that the city staff were wondering about breaking up the parking, and I guess your meeting, we can't get rid of any parking. Are we required parking here? I don't remember reading that.
Yeah, there's no variances on parking requested.
So you can't get rid of any parking. I'm asking.
I don't think we even have one extra stop.
Okay. Yeah, because that is a shame that it'd be nice. It would be much nicer if we had a thicker planting island where we could have some trees cooling that big, expensive concrete asphalt space. So I don't know what. I think it would still be worthwhile exploring if you can. And that's all. I thank you. I think this will be a great addition to the area. It's really developing well, and the addition of these residential units will be, I'm sure, greatly utilized. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Tony.
Yeah, thank you. I think the form and character of this project is very, very good. And I have the same concern that is in the report that Kate has referenced. And for me, it's a density sea of asphalt. That all of the 50% of the units are going to be looking across that to the next building. And the ones that are particularly impacted negatively are obviously the ones along the ground floor, which to me you've exacerbated their unfortunate outlook by putting a great sidewalk along the entire frontage in front of their windows, so the privacy concern as well as a visual relief from the parking. So I guess my comments will be twofold. One, I don't see the need for any of those internal sidewalks because of the harm that they do, in my opinion. And the pedestrian movement could be just as easily handled if you wanted internal by some kind of treatment of the aisle paving surface, either texture, color, or something like that, painted lines, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But please give those poor ground floor suites a little more breathing space, of green space, instead of a concrete sidewalk next to an asphalt parking lot. That's a big concern for me. And as to the amount of parking, if I do the arithmetic correctly, I think you said you had 3 buildings with 71 units in each. If that's correct, that's a total of 213. You have 270 stalls. So if you went with 100% parking, then you have 57 stalls theoretically that you could burn in favor of more landscaping in that central area. I don't know, I mean, that's almost a half an acre of square footage. I have no idea what the appetite of either the client or the NIMO is for any kind of variances to parking whatsoever, but for rental accommodation, to have that amount of parking beyond 100% per unit, to me, seems surplus, particularly in the resulting internal environment of all that asphalt. Otherwise, I think the buildings themselves are great. Backhanded compliment, but my only concern, as you can tell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Very nice looking buildings. I think you really captured the Finnish agrarian style in a very unique way. I think for a large building, I think it works very, very well. Parking, I kind of agree with Tony. I think we can reduce and support a variance for reduced parking for use to improve the site. I'm concerned about, well, first of all, the landscape islands, are they wide enough to support trees inside them?
Sorry, not right now. Not
Okay.
as they are, so they just have ornamental grass, so.
Yeah, like again, that's probably, I guess I'm talking about reducing the amount of parking stalls, and that's one of the reasons why I think to try to get some columnar trees in there would help to break it up quite a bit, especially when you drive in off of Junction Avenue. Also, staff had a comment, I agree with it. Parking stalls in front of entrances isn't the best idea. I'm not sure. Obviously, you did it probably because you wanted to meet the parking ratio, I take it. Is that right?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted again. Yes, there's so much parking on the site. The requirement is based on bedrooms, right? So it's in excess of the number of units. The client was not in love with going for a variance, but not to say that we can't have a look at that again. The comment about the sidewalks, I absolutely agree with. We have gone back and forth with the city about circulation through the site, but if we're able to minimize some of that, then we could get some more planting happening, maybe widen that center green space to be able to accommodate a few shade trees in that area. So it's definitely something I would want to look at as well.
Well, I personally am concerned about the pedestrian circulation to the site, so I kind of disagree with Tony a bit about the sidewalks and how they connect to the building and to each of the streets as well. But that we can have that discuss that. What is the plan for the site lighting, especially in the detention area? Are you going to be going with bollard lights around there, or?
We haven't really looked at in that area for lighting, but I think for security and just, that could be a really, for lack of a better word, romantic spot in the evening, right? A little bit of a glow with some bulbs and your kids can run around. Yeah, I think that's a great idea to put some bollards in there.
Yeah, if you haven't done any planning on it yet, normally the applicant does give us an idea of what they're planning for those areas. Usually the landscape architect takes care of that. Only other comment is if you're in the central parking area, and whether you're a visitor or the tenants that are there, how do you get to the entranceway for Building B?
Yeah, I struggled with that. We used to have it the other way, facing it internally, but the one of the requests from the city was that the front door fronted 11.
Yeah, being that it's not a real main road, obviously Thames and Lawler are the main roads there. I think I would feel strongly that you mirror it and put the entranceway on the parking side, even though, you know, having a street presence. The entranceways aren't really well defined as it is, and I don't think you would miss having the entranceway moved to the other side and do what you've done on 10th, which is just have that small little sidewalk coming in to sort of almost like a fire escape area, I guess. But any thoughts about that, or whether or not it was strictly staff that wanted you to do that, but your real intention was to have it on the inside?
We had it on the inside. We just responded to the request.
Right. Well, I guess I disagree with City on that. Sorry, staff. Aside from that, yes, other than that Building B, and if you can get the parking away from the front entrances, and I would support a reduction in parking, support a variance for that, and look at including trees in the landscape islands. I think that would that's what I'd be recommending. So thanks for the presentation. Very nice job.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I'm not going to add much because everybody has, as usual, covered all the things that I would have said. But I think I will reinforce just Kevin's last point. My main comment was going to be, and it kind of relates not only just to the entrances, but it's also to the whole discussion about the parking and that sea of asphalt. I think you have to commit either to doing what I'll call a courtyard scheme, where your buildings are facing the courtyard, or you're doing a street scheme. And right now you're trying to do a little bit of both, and I think you can strengthen this by making it a courtyard, all the buildings oriented to the courtyard, I'll call it the courtyard, to the parking area, and then treat the parking area not as a parking lot, but as a pedestrian space that has cars in it. So that, the Woonerf thing, or whatever they call it. So you're not rigidly defining sidewalks and drive aisles, you're defining paved areas that things travel over, whether it's kids on bikes or vehicles. And that will probably open up some flexibility on how you manage getting some more landscaping in there. And I think it would make that center space, like going to Tony's comment, then people will be looking over a landscape courtyard that happens to have vehicles in it, not a sea of asphalt. So I think they're not minor tweaks, but I think they're doable, and they will definitely help the project. Really that's the only comment I had. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask or suggest, I guess I can make the motion. Can I make the motion? Is that? I can give the wording of the motion. How's that? So I've got a few recommendations, I think we'll call them, or considerations. And if I miss one, let me know. I think, Kevin, you were very strong about some increased or variation or whatever, more definition for the building entrances. And I would mirror that and also say they should all face into the courtyard. You mentioned mirroring Building B, bollard site lighting, and I think that's more in context of bollards versus big overhead.
Yep, the site lighting, that's not a recommendation.
Not a recommendation?
Didn't have that.
Okay. And then a recommendation for consideration of a parking variance to increase the amount of landscaping in the central courtyard area. Is that captured?
Yeah. And also in that one, also to hopefully remove parking stalls in front of the entrance.
From the entranceways, right?
Yeah. So a lot of people, when they're moving in, will park in front of an entranceway that's load.
Yeah.
And if there's no area near the entranceway, unless they're going to go on the underground parking to do it, and then they quite often will be blocking stalls down there. So.
Okay. Tony, you had the moving the internal sidewalks away from the buildings to increase the potential for landscape space. So do you think that's captured in the whole changing variance for parking and increasing the landscape?
I was going to say, I think your comments and summation was brilliant, Charles, so I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Steve Ashfall from character, and then Kate. Consider the possibility for trees in the parking area, so that again gets captured. Yeah.
I forgot to mention one little comment that the landscape architect can consider. Just that the Gladicia tree hasn't been doing so well, so you just may want to look at that selection here. But your choice. You're the landscape architect. That's all. Kind of like a footnote.
But not a recommendation.
No.
No. Okay.
I'm just putting it out there for her to think about.
Okay, so I think that was one. I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you get 4, Lori?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So I will ask maybe somebody else to move a motion with those recommendations. Kate?
I move to, what do I have to say? I move to accept the recommendations.
Accept the proposal as presented with the following recommendations or considerations?
Yes, I make that move.
Okay. Seconder?
I'll second that.
I missed who that was. Was that Tyler?
Kevin.
Kevin, okay, sorry. Okay, seconded by Kevin. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? All right, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and we have members on our way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We have some business. So we got the minutes from
Thank you, applicants.
June the 11th. Did everybody have a chance to read them in great detail and find any errors or omissions? Okay. Does anybody have any errors or omissions? Kevin's going, they're good. Okay, so in our informal way, we're saying, shall we adopt the minutes from the last meeting? And we all say yes, thank you very much. Okay. One last question for staff. Any potential extra meeting dates or anything?
No.
Not yet.
This time, no.
Good.
May I ask a question?
Yes?
This applies obviously to this project, but others will no doubt come up down the road. What is Nanaimo's appetite for parking variances, particularly for rental units and particularly in terms of trade-off for green space? Is there sort of a general...
How much time do you have, Tony?
Oh, sorry, okay.
I can give a short answer.
Okay.
Perhaps you're familiar with it. The City of Nanaimo in 2018 did endorse a policy for consideration of parking variances, and it does contain a number of different considerations where we may entertain a parking variance. And so we would review any application for a parking variance against that policy.
May I add one?
Yeah.
So through Charles, another comment. When we did the parking bylaw review, the question came up about an arbitrary 10% reduction in the parking requirement when it's a rental development. And that was tested with some feedback from the community. Different area than this, but one very outspoken, impacted by some parking issues. And it really brought back to staff the comment that no, we don't want to assume a 10% arbitrary reduction when it's rental. But in close analysis of the parking bylaw and what was drafted, the review that was given input by our transportation engineering staff and parking counts throughout our city, we had already accounted for a reduced scenario. So the reductions generally across the board for all numbers of bedrooms and unit types has already considered, the walk score and proximity to services and transit and employment centers, and already brought us into a more current day reduced rates. So to go beyond that, we're not seeing that very much. If anything, it's a 1-2 space variance, whereas we used to see 20 space variances. So
I'm just asking because, it's all very well of us design panel members to say, well, go for variance, get more green space, but if it's a waste of time, then we're kind of just blowing smoke here, and I don't really know what to say about that, but anyway, that's my point.
Tony, I could add that parking is obviously always a very polarizing item. And I would say on council, despite staff policy or despite city policy, we have some that will just about never vote for parking variance, and then probably there's a couple like myself that don't even believe we should have parking minimums. So it can be, the discussion of a variance at the council table can be quite interesting in that regard.
we could try to get rid of parking.
Okay, I think with that, we can adjourn the meeting. So thank you all for attending virtually.